Did Iran charge people to go through the Strait of Hormuz before this?
No, never did.
Did they control the Strait of Hormuz at all?
Well, before the war started, not at all. Before February 28, Iran did not control the Strait of Hormuz. What Iran did is it moved from survival to ambition. So Iran saw there was an opportunity with the bombing because the United States had we didn't even have our Navy here. There was no means whatsoever to sort of offset this Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz. Nothing at all. Iran took this as an opportunity, and the opportunity was to seize power.
So is it fair to hypothesize that actually this war might have strengthened Iran because now it has this control over energy on a global basis that it didn't have before?
Without a doubt, Stephen. I don't say this with any happiness. There's really no question at this point that Iran is stronger today than it was before the war started on February 28th. And that's because it controls the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that it can threaten at will virtually any ship that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's demonstrated this over and over and over again. Even when the ships turn off their transponders, they are still able to threaten ships as they go through. And every time a ship tries to run the gauntlet, they run into a drone, mine. They run into basically Iran's barrier. And that is Iran's power.
There was a tweet that went viral this week about this. I'm going to read the tweet here.
Please.
It says, "I'm confused. The US has the most powerful military on earth. We've bombed the hell out of Iran for 4 months. Trump says their Air Force, Navy, and nearly all of their missile capabilities are destroyed. So how is Iran still capable of hitting US bases right now?"
Because only a small fraction of its drone arsenal is necessary and missile arsenal in order to inflict that damage. Iran entered this war with thousands, we think tens of thousands of drones, ballistic missiles, anti-shipping missiles, which are lower sea-skimming cruise missiles. And even though we have destroyed large fractions of their missiles, they have plenty left over to hit these targets because they're doing saturation attacks. They're essentially doing swarms. They're saturating our defensive capability, and the drones and missiles that get through, plenty enough to damage it to the point we can barely use it if at all.
So is it mainly drones that they're using at the moment to conduct these attacks on the Strait of Hormuz and on US bases?
It's been a combination. In March, it was mostly intermediate range ballistic missiles and then drones. Since about the middle of March until just quite recently, it's mostly been drones, except for Israel. When Israel's been attacked, it's been very heavily with ballistic missiles. But what you're seeing now, that's just in the last week, is you're starting to see the use of ballistic missiles. You're seeing the use of cruise missiles. These are these sea-skimming missiles here, and they're being used against multiple targets. So the full arsenal that Iran has, the full range of the arsenal, it appears to be fully there, stocked very well, and they're showing no signs of running out of ammo. If anybody's running out of ammo, it might be America running out of interceptors to shoot things down, but we don't know that as a fact. And I think that what you're seeing is Iran has been highly intelligent about how it has deployed its missiles.
Trump said they have no Navy, it's been knocked out. They have no Air Force, that's been knocked out. They have no air detection, that's been knocked out. Their radar has been knocked out. And just about everything's been knocked out. Virtually everything they have has been knocked out. He said that on Truth Social in May 2026. If everything has been knocked out, then how come there's no safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz? How come this weekend we saw more Americans tragically die because of Iranian attacks?
Because what they have left, we can't knock out, and is plenty to do the damage. That's the fundamental problem. We took out the easy stuff to hit. They didn't need it. in order to seize control of Hormuz and keep Hormuz and start to defend themselves against more aggressive pressure. And the bottom line is that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to eliminate that capability. We would do it in a heartbeat if we could right away.
Explain to me in just simple terms why it's so difficult to remove that capability. You know, I was looking at this picture here, which shows the size of a drone relative to another object, which
an F-150.
is a car. So I guess there was two questions, which is like, where do they hide these, and how easy is it to make one of these drones?
So they hide those drones, Stephen, everywhere. Okay. They're in drone caverns, they're in warehouses, they're everywhere. They could be, so that drone, just to kind of give you a sense here, would easily fit in this room. But the reason this is so difficult is notice how small that is here, that drone, compared to the scale of where it could be. And this is what I really want to show you, because this is, I think, the hardest part to explain to people as I'm talking in whatever format I'm talking, is it's the scale of eliminating the drone and missile threat is much bigger than people realize, because they're hearing measurements. Well, we've destroyed X percent and Y percent. And that's why you're getting the question. But if you look at this map, this is where these drones, these Shahed 136, could literally be anywhere in this radius, 500-mile area. And notice how huge this area is. This area like this is bigger than California. It's 1.5 times the size of California.
So I guess it's like trying to find a truck in California.
It's like trying to find a truck in California. These little things here are the Shahed drones.
Yeah.
Okay. And what we're doing in this area, which is mountainous, so this is why we have a three-dimensional. It's not just a two-dimensional problem. It's a three-dimensional problem.
We'll show some of these visuals on screen now, just to show what the terrain where they're hiding these drones might be like.
They could be anywhere in these mountains. There's all kinds of, and if we kind of imagine this as a visual, so this is the general problem here we have, which is just this stuff could be anywhere. And now these are the drones, and this is the terrain that the drones are going to hide in. And notice I've just sprinkled some here, but now I'm going to cover these up with more terrain. And notice you can't see those drones anymore. And now I'm going to put in some more drones somewhere else. And now we're going to put another layer in. And this is again, it's the three-dimensional part of the problem, meaning hard to find from the air. Now, if I get my people out and I start going in, now I could start to dig them out. But let's just keep doing this for a while. So now I'm putting in another, say, 20 drones. And I'm going to cover it yet again. And then I'm going to put in another set of drones, and I'm covering it yet again.
I guess you could put all the drones in there and you would still be able to cover them.
You would, yes, but you wouldn't do it you'd do it in layers. So they're going to make it so that if you find one, you're going to have to work really hard. You have to get them drone by drone by drone, or at least in clusters of them.
I guess also an important point of context is they're also making new ones this whole time.
Exactly. So our estimates that we have leaked from the Pentagon are in April. That's months ago. These drones, they were making 55,000 a year and giving them to Russia. So just think about that. That's thousands every single month. Why haven't they made another 5,000 or 10,000 drones since April? If you want this to open, so let me
the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz. So now let me just explain. So this is our problem. If you want the Strait of Hormuz to open, it's not good enough to say, oh, look, I've found like dozens or hundreds of these drones. You've got to persuade the shipping companies that their ships are safe. They don't obey orders from the Pentagon. You can't order the shippers to go through.
Because the ships are expensive.
The ships are expensive.
How
and
expensive?
The crews don't want to, in the many millions. Millions and millions of dollars. I don't know the exact amount of these tankers, but each tanker will carry between 700,000 and over 1 million barrels of oil. And so they have quite and you can do the math right there to see how much each ship is worth carrying that much oil.
I was looking at the cost here. It says when you combine a brand new vessel with a full tank of oil, a single tank crossing the Strait of Hormuz is a floating asset worth 300 million.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't,
and that's
I learned something from you every time.
And that's not even the lives on board, which again are going to cause an insurance problem, but also no one wants people to die.
Well, and they don't want to die. So you're going to have mutant. They're not going to. So this is why you're seeing more ships leaving than you're seeing ships come in. And the ships that are coming in are very heavily coming to Iran's ports. That's one of the reasons President Trump put the blockade back on. It's because what happened here is the MOU, this whole idea, is not opening up the Strait of Hormuz. It's not preventing what's going to come in the next few weeks, maybe month, which is the world economic crisis. We are knocking on the door of what President Trump told us he was trying to avoid, which is the world literally running out of oil. And just today, before we started, the Houthis, which big ally of Iran, so just to come back here and re-show the map, remember I said that once the Strait of Hormuz became shut down, there was 2 million of barrels coming out every day through, for the UAE, coming out through Fujairah, and then 4 to 5 million coming out from Saudi Arabian oil going out to the Red Sea. And this is the port there at the Red Sea. Well, the Houthis have just shut this down literally today.
Oh, really?
Literally before we came on. It happened about 6 hours ago. This has been escalating for several weeks. Iran's been asking for this. This is part of the general escalation that we're seeing.
Okay, so we've got the Strait of Hormuz closed. We've got the Houthis closing
the Red
Sea. So there's no oil flowing through there.
Yeah.
So are we on the verge of an economic crisis if things don't change quickly?
Yes. This is literally the nightmare scenario that we've been worrying about, and the reason is this. Go back and let's think about this from the 20 million barrels of oil that was going through the Strait of Hormuz. So when Iran gained control of the Strait of Hormuz, what happened immediately is the Saudi Arabia and the UAE started to bypass Hormuz with 7 million barrels a day. So that means only 13 million at issue, right? That's helpful. The next is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the United States. And we started to release about 5 or 6 million barrels a week through the strategic oil.
When?
We started to do this, it's right around the middle of March. I can't remember the exact date, but notice that you put a big dent in that. And so that's one of the reasons the oil markets did not go crazy right away.
So I've got some data here then. It says President Trump authorized the emergency release of 172 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserve designed to be pumped out over roughly 120 days. This wasn't just a US issue or the US acting alone. The US drawdown was part of a massive coordinated effort by 32 member nations of the International Energy Agency, who collectively agreed to release 400 million barrels from their emergency stockpiles. Because these massive releases were done to offset the Hormuz blockade, the US strategic reserve has been heavily depleted, and as of July 2026, the reserve has dropped down to roughly 300 million barrels, which marks the lowest level the reserve has since 1983, a more than 40-year low.
They're being depleted. Once you spend your reserve, you don't get it refilled. And that's what I think President Trump was talking about when he said we're about to run out of oil in 4 weeks. That was exactly the date, because we've just run to the date of that quote. What you just read is we're coming to about the 120th day. And so what that means is all of that cushion that we had in the system to protect the price of gas already went up. Now you have even more risk. And then on top of that, Stephen, we have another set of problems besides the oil itself, which is refining capacity in the world. So we don't put crude oil in our cars. We put gasoline in our cars, diesel as well. Well, how do you get the gas and the diesel? You refine the crude. So that means the refineries need to work. Well, where are much of the world's refineries? In the Persian Gulf. Not just oil comes through the Persian Gulf. Refined product, they're called distillates. They come through the Persian Gulf as well. Now, so that means you've shut down something like 25% or a third of the world's refining capacity. Now let's marry this to what's happening with Russia and Ukraine's blasting Russia refineries in Russia. So what's happening, Stephen, is you are getting not just the decline of crude itself is about to run out, but the refining capacity now has been heavily strained and limited. It might be down, 40%. I don't know the exact number, but it's something on that order. And what you're seeing then is what I think President Trump was seeing a month ago, which is he wanted the Strait of Hormuz to open, but he also didn't want to own the L. And what President Trump has decided is he'd rather take the risk with the world's economy than own the L, own the loss. And maybe he'll change his mind.
What do you mean he'd rather take the risk with the world's economy than just own the L? So what would owning the L look like in this scenario?
Owning the L would allow Iran to follow through with Article 5. So if we go back to Article 5.
To control the Strait.
To control the Strait on its terms.
But that would be a set of precedents for all of these straits.
Yes.
Around the world.
That's exactly right.
And you can't have that.
Well, these are the choices we have, Stephen. So the choices: do we have a global economic crisis, possibly recession, possibly worse, or do we let Iran control the Strait of Hormuz?
This is not a good place to be.
Well, that's the fork in the road that I was telling you was the stage 3 dilemma. So that's exactly where we were in March. So Stephen, just to explain to your audience, because they're trying to figure out how are we getting here, this is what the 20 years of modeling was really showing. We would very quickly get to this fork in the road. It wouldn't take months and months. It would happen right away. And President Trump has been trying to avoid the escalation trap. This is called an escalation trap. And he's been trying to avoid that trap. He tried to avoid it with bombing for 6 weeks. He tried to avoid it with the blockade. He tried signing the MOU. He let J.D. Vance offer money, and that none of those were actually working. And where he is now is still at this fork in the road, the dilemma of the escalation trap. Either he owns the loss, which it means everything you just said, and becomes known as the president who allowed not just the Strait of Hormuz to be controlled, but set a precedent for other countries and other non-state actors to control their choke points. Or we have we take it back physically. Are we going to physically take it back?
So we'll go through the stages in the escalation trap straight away after we move on from this point around oil, because I think some of my audience might not know that this escalation trap is historically predictable and that you've been talking about this for a long time. And it also allows us to understand exactly what happens next. I was quite shocked when you just said that Trump said recently that the US would run out of oil within 4 weeks. So I just looked down at some research here, and it says that during a recent press conference at the G7 summit in June 2026, President Trump made a blunt admission about how dangerously low global energy oil stockpiles have become due to the ongoing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. His direct quote was, "We run out of reserves at about 4 weeks. There are reserves all over the world, and we would run really low. We would run out, and there'll be a time when you wouldn't be able to get it. It would be bedlam."
Yes.
Why is he saying that? Doesn't that make him look bad?
It makes him, he's being, I think, forthright in why he signed the MOU, which is to avoid that bedlam, the world economic crisis. However, the problem for President Trump is, in order to avoid the bedlam, he has to let Iran control the Strait of Hormuz, establish that sphere of influence I was explaining. And he, almost immediately after he said that statement, within 48 hours, undermined that MOU that would have avoided that. Had the MOU just been implemented as written, we may not be sitting here today talking about the impending world crisis. And I believe one of the reasons we're knocking on the door of more escalation right now is because President Trump is desperate to open the Strait of Hormuz. I think he's taking low risk, high risk military option. I think he's pursuing military options he likely knows are unlikely to work, but they're his best chance to open Hormuz before the crisis literally hits.
But there's also another before, which is the midterm elections.
Yes.
Am I right in thinking that this midterm election takes place in 3 months' time? And if his approval rating is low at that point because of what's going on with the war, because when Americans go to the pump to fill up their cars, they notice the prices are way higher than usual, that means those Americans in the midterm elections will vote for the Democrats, which means he will lose the Congress. So he basically needs to make sure Americans are happy in 3 months' time.
He needs to take the best chance he can to make that happen.
Okay.
And I think that what happened here, Stephen, is his quote, you just quoted him, I think it was June 17th. He's saying that within a month, those reserves are going to run out and we're heading to that bedlam, that economic crisis. And that is already happening. 4 weeks later, we're right on that trajectory. That trajectory has not changed. Maybe we bought an extra week or two of time because some oil did get out from the Persian Gulf. Not that much, but enough for a few weeks here. So maybe it's going to now not fall on August 1st. Maybe it'll be August, say 15th or 17th. But it will hit. And that's what he was. And now I think he sees when it hits, he's going to lose. There's a good chance that the Republicans will lose more seats in the House and in the Senate. That will make him the lamest of lame ducks for his last 2 years. It may not be that he would be removed from office. That's probably not going to happen. But it could be that he will be impeached again. He will be tied in knots by the Democratic-controlled House or Democratic-controlled House and Senate. And this is what he's trying to offset. But he knows something that most of us, I think, are not really taking seriously. Which is that the world is we're like on the Titanic and we're about to hit the iceberg. And maybe that iceberg moved a little bit further away, but we're still right on the trajectory to hit that iceberg. And it's coming. And when the iceberg hits, there's not enough lifeboats for everybody. And who's going to be short of lifeboats? The Republicans. And that's why I think people made the mistake when they said, well, President Trump couldn't possibly escalate before the midterms. Couldn't possibly. For weeks, Stephen, I've been on shows talking about, why President Trump will escalate maybe after the midterms, maybe next year, but he's certainly, and I kept trying to explain that's probably not right. And that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing that President Trump is desperate to try to open the Strait of Hormuz. He, I think, is being told probably directly from his military, these options are very low risk. They're very high risk. They're very unlikely to succeed. But now that the Titanic is going to hit the iceberg, his only other choice is to completely walk back and say, you're right, Iran. You control Hormuz. You set the fees. You don't have to make any limits on your nuclear program. You are the fourth center of world power. And Donald Trump, it happened under my watch. That's a big L to wear on your chest, Stephen. And that would be true, I think, for any president. This is what Lyndon Johnson faced in Vietnam. We now have the tapes that Johnson was making in the White House, in conversations. It wasn't just Nixon making tapes here. Johnson was making tapes. And we now have tapes of Johnson as he's making decisions to escalate the Vietnam War, explaining that he knows this is very unlikely to end the war. It's likely to make it worse. And why is he doing it? He's doing it because he's trying to hold on to his Great Society program just for another 4 or 5 months. And what he's hoping is that even though the escalation is likely not to work, there's some tiny chance it will. And in 4 or 5 months, he'll be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat. he became, it failed domestically. Lyndon Johnson had to pull back from running for re-election because of the escalations in the Vietnam War. And President Trump is running the same risk, that even though I believe that he's doing this because he's trying to give himself and the Republicans the best chance to win in November, it may not work. That's why I think President Trump already planted the seed of China meddling in the elections. He's already started the conversation that there's another possible stolen election in our future, this time possibly by a foreign country, possibly China.